time that I do things. However, I decided that because I've got my wedding coming up this weekend, really excited, that I wanted to be able to give back to you guys as best I could beforehand to give you some clarity before we started to hit the ground running. So with that said, let's look into why you're lacking clarity in business. Now, why do I think this is so important? Because there is so many options now in our lives. I think so many people feel overwhelmed about where to start, what my next step is, that very often they get stuck. And for me right now, I think if I can offer you anything today, it would be the ability to help you get unstuck, take the next step to enable you to move forward. So the first biggest reason that I think people struggle is because they dabble with too many options. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Right? It means you often don't know what to prioritize, and you find yourself, shifting gears very often. You kind of have the shiny penny syndrome. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's you see a shiny penny and you're like, this is amazing, I want to go grab that. And then suddenly there's just so much going on and you don't know what to do. Okay. Out of interest, if you are excited for this clarity conversation, let's get this chat going as well. Please put a fire in the chat, a fire emoji if you're excited to gain a bit more clarity in your business moving forward. Now, I want to explain briefly, literally what I did this morning with one of my clients, because he also didn't know what to prioritize. He's currently raising for his business. He's managed to sign on a client, but unfortunately, one of the big challenges that he has is kind of cash flow. Now, I think he's got about 18 grand coming in, but he's got lots of different challenges. And he's like, where do I focus? And I think very often in our businesses, we don't know where to focus. So we end up getting distracted and we don't know what to prioritize. So using the example for him, we looked into what are the income generating tasks that you have? What are the tasks that you do that actually generate income in your business? Because a lot of people get stuck in the day to day and they kind of get distracted. And because we don't have that accountability, we don't know the tasks that we need to do, we end up dabbling in loads of things and spreading ourselves far too thin. The analogy that I often like to use is being a shotgun as opposed to being a sniper, right? If you're dabbling in so many options, very often you are shotgunning all over the place and you're not getting sniper clear on exactly what you need to do to overcome it. So when it comes to overcoming these challenges, if you've got so many options and you don't know where to start, I just want to clarify, if that's you and you're listening and you feel like you haven't got clarity on exactly where you are and you've got too many options, put 100% in the chat. Let's see if we can get this chat going. I can see we've got Michelle, Janet, Benjamin, Monica, a few people live with us here. So please do put that 100% in the chat if that's you and you feel like you've got too many options. Okay. Now, as we start to overcome this, what is it that we can do to gain clarity? Well, the biggest piece of advice that I give, and we do this time and time again with people that we work with, is you want to be able to figure out for the next 3 months, if you were to become laser focused on what matters most to you, and you were to just pick a thing that would be the most important priority, what would that be for your business? Because very often we become overwhelmed. We don't know what is the priority. So instead of being able to just go for one thing and really see it through, we think about lots of things, analysis paralysis, and we don't do what we need to in order to move forward. Very often we get in this perfectionist mode. So my challenge to you guys is to think about what are the options that you have and then pick that one thing. Pick the one thing that you think for Q3 is going to make the biggest difference to you. Because I know that if you do that, you say that's the one thing and maybe that'll be the major and you have a few minors, it will make a world of difference for you. So if you are dabbling, that is going to be the key. Okay, next. The other reason, and the second reason why you may be lacking clarity in your business is because you feel like you're drowning. You have got so much on that you just do not know what you could possibly do next. There's just too much going on. If that's you, I'd like for you to put a wave in the chat, a wave in the chat. If that's you, you feel like you're drowning, you just don't have time to step back, you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. The chat's feeling a little bit sad today. I'm going to just get some emojis going in here because I think that's important. Just to make sure that you guys, if you can partake in this, and it will allow me to enable me to tailor the content accordingly so I can spend time on things that resonate for you. So if that's you and you feel like you're drowning, you just don't have time to step back, and that's why you're lacking clarity, please do put a wave or some sort of emoji in the chat just so I know that you are there. So I wanted to once again give an example of this because I think sometimes we can learn much more from others than we do from attempting to learn from ourselves. So in this case, I'll give an example of Charlie. So he was a chap that I worked with. He had 3 different businesses and he was like, look, I don't have time to stop. I'm very overwhelmed. What is it that I do? I've got no idea, right? And there were two main things that we did that enabled him to gain a lot of clarity, especially if you feel like your butter spread over too much bread. If you've got a lot on, if that's you, yeah, this is definitely one that's going to really help. So two different elements here. So the first thing is thinking time. Now, what do I mean by thinking time? This is time to actually think about a certain thing in your business to enable you to move forward. Now, the reason why this is so powerful is because too many of us don't spend time to actually think on problems. We're just reacting. We're putting out fires in our business, and we're not doing what we need to move ourselves forward, to move ourselves forward in a way that actually works. And Crystal, love the high five there. So thinking time is very simple. You can click onto my Instagram. It kind of has an explanation on there, but let me explain briefly, what this is. You're going to spend 45 minutes of uninterrupted time diving into a question. So a great question, given this, the topic of the conversation today, would be, what does my major focus need to be for Q3 of this year to move my business forward? Just that question. And you spend 45 minutes of uninterrupted time thinking about that question. Now, what will happen is you'll be able to gain so much clarity because you're not being distracted by other things, but it's uninterrupted time. Now, then in the next 15 minutes, so it's an hour total, 45 minutes thinking about it. Then you spend the last 15 being able to digest and look into things that you can do moving forward to enable you to have more clarity. This is one of the best ways to take a step back and start to look into how you can gain that clarity to enable you to move forward in a way that really works. The second thing is something that has been super helpful. There was a chap that I worked with who was incredibly overwhelmed because he lost his business. Like, it was $1 billion business, lost everything. He didn't know where to start. He just had no clarity on what was next. And this is a technique for those who feel like they run in circles and you feel like you get stuck in a certain, pattern of thinking. And it's difficult to kind of overcome it. Often you're dealing with the same challenges and problems and you don't know how to overcome those types of things. So in that case, the technique here is something called morning pages. Now, how does morning pages work? Morning pages was a technique originally developed by a lady called Julia Cameron. And what was very fascinating is it was first used to be able to help people to boost their creativity, right? So for example, as a writer, to boost this, you would do 3 pages of uninterrupted work, now literally writing, no more, no less, but you would just keep writing. And it's the same for our minds and what's going on, especially if we feel like we've got a lot in our head. This is a great way to externalize your mind, especially for those who struggle with meditation as well. This is a fantastic active tool to allow you to process a lot of the things that are perhaps going on underneath the surface. So how it works is you're basically going to write. So you're going to write all the different stuff that you need to be able to do and work on, and anything that's on your mind. And you do it first thing in the morning. What it does is it kind of deloads everything, allows you to process. And what it does is it adds space so that you don't feel like you're drowning anymore, but can actually take a step back and have that space to be able to gain more clarity. I think a lot of people struggle because they feel like there's just not enough time in the day to get everything done. And they're just struggling. They feel really, really overwhelmed. Actually, out of interest, for those listening who feel like you just don't have enough time in the day, could you put like a time clock or something in the chat just so I can see if that's you and if that's something that you struggle with? If you feel like you're lacking time, put a clock in the chat if that is you. So we covered the first two, okay? So if you're dabbling with too many options and you don't know what to prioritize, we're going to be looking into a power year, 3 months, gain that laser focus. The next thing is you feel like you're drowning, we're going to be looking into thinking time and also morning pages. I do want to say as well, if you feel like you can't listen to this entire conversation, feel free to DM me on Instagram or the platform that you're listening to saying clarity, and I'll send some more resources your way if you can't attend for the entirety of the session, because I want to make sure that I can give you guys the value that you need. So just message me, especially for those listening on Clubhouse, just click my face, scroll down to Instagram, message me saying clarity, and I'll send some more things your way to move you forward. So we're going to go on to number 3. Now, the third reason why you are lacking clarity in your business is because you are overwhelmed by the mountain of the task. Okay, the task is too large, it is too big, and you have got no idea where to start. And I know that I can certainly relate to this when I did my TED Talk. There was so much going on. For those of you who don't know, and it's your first time kind of listening to me, this was a TED Talk that I did in Mandarin Chinese. And it was incredibly overwhelming because I just had no idea, where to focus, what I was doing. and just didn't know where to start. Out of interest, if that's you and you feel like you're struggling, I want you to put a mountain in the chat. Let's get this chat going a little bit more for those listening. Put a mountain in the chat if that's you, if you feel like it's so much you don't know where to start with regards to your task. So this is exactly what happened for me. So I'm planning this TED Talk. I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I just had no idea. And one of the first steps that I think is really important, especially when we have so much on, is to be able to break down that mountain into different base camps. Okay, imagine if you're climbing Everest, you don't do it all in one. You've got base camp 1, base camp 2. Like there's different milestones to hit. And I think for a lot of people, they don't spend the time being able to plan and think of like, what are the segments of this, as opposed to tackling the whole thing. Naomi, appreciate you putting the mountain in there, and you can relate to that. So I actually do have a 6-step process for breaking down these tasks. I will message put a mountain in the chat. I'll bring you 6 steps. So if you want that, feel free to put a mountain there. It's just some simple steps. It's an article that I wrote that I've done with a lot of people that have been really helpful. So when I was prepping for this TED Talk, right, I was completely overwhelmed, no idea where to start. I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And it literally paralyzed me for a week, and I just didn't know what to do. And then it was 2 weeks, and I couldn't really figure out how to best break it down. And then I realized that there were some fundamental things that for myself I had to do. Like I had to figure out, how do I translate this into Chinese? What is the body language I want to use? Like what is the length? What is my message? And there were different fragments there. So for you in your business, if there's a mountain that you're trying to overcome or wanting to be able to climb, I want you to think about like, what is the real outcome that you want to be able to achieve, and externalize your mind. And externality is really important in order to gain clarity. A lot of people don't have clarity because they keep everything in their head and they try to make sense of it. Now, the truth is that's almost impossible to be able to do on a consistent basis, because our brain can only store 7 things roughly of information, like new information, as we're trying to process things. But if you externalize it, it gives you more of a capacity so that you can deal with more. So when we're looking into this mountain, right, of a task, if you can break that down into different segments, like I said, I'll send those 6 steps to you. It will enable you to be able to move through that mountain, as opposed to it being this unformidable thing that you cannot overcome. Right? So we've got those first 3. All right. So we've mentioned feeling like you're drowning, you don't have time to step back. We mentioned dabbling in too many options, and if you're overwhelmed by the mountain of the task. The next one is actually something that is so key for most people that it's crazy. And the worst part of this is some people feel like it serves them, but it serves them in a way that doesn't actually help them long term. Okay. And this is that you have advice from too many sources and you don't know what to pick. You have advice from too many sources and you don't know what to pick. And I'll give you an example that I really struggled with, just taking a slightly different spin on this. When I was becoming when I burnt out, this is many years ago, I started to look into foods and I wanted to figure out like, well, what's good for me, what's bad for me. And as I typed in things online, there'd be experts saying that blueberries were terrible for you. There'd be experts saying that blueberries were the best things for you. And I was so overwhelmed because what ended up happening is that there were so many different pieces of advice that I ended up sticking to what I knew best. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. And what happens is you're listening to so many different people with opinions who say, this is the best strategy. This is the best strategy. This is the best strategy, that you end up switching strategies so much that you don't stick to any long enough to be able to move forward. I actually did a post on Instagram saying this and kind of challenging what Einstein says, because as Einstein mentions, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. However, in the age we're in right now, insanity is more of doing lots of different things and dabbling in lots of different things and listening to so many different sources and trying loads, but not sticking to things long enough to be able to see them through. And I think there's not enough people sticking to things long enough to be able to see them through to enable you to actually move forward. So when you are looking into who you're listening to, especially for your business, you want to clarify, like, how many experts am I listening to on a certain topic? Because if you're listening to 4, 5, 6, 7, great, you can kind of gain some perspective, but very often it can be overwhelming. So you stick to what you know. So if you have advice from too many sources, that challenge is there's so much free information, your analysis paralysis, you're going to stay to stay in the same position. So instead, my advice would be to pick maybe 1 or 2 people, preferably 1, that you can actually absorb all the information on and actually implement. Because even though it feels good to get new information and you feel like you're progressing, the truth is, information is nothing unless you use it, right? Knowledge is just potential power. So what we're looking for is to be able to give you the ability to not just listen from too many sources, but to implement from a few of experts that you genuinely think can help you and actually move forward. So if you're lacking clarity in your business, right, I want you to think about who is in a position, like in my business, a mentor that can point me in the right direction. Like, is there anyone that you know? Or is there anyone that you can gain clarity with? And then choose to gain that information from them on a consistent basis to enable you to move forward sustainably. Because I think too often we are, once again, dabbling, there's advice from too many sources and we're not doing what we need to on a consistent basis. Instead, I think there's a phrase one of my trainers use, which is naughty, but I think it makes sense, which is mental masturbation, right? It feels good momentarily, but it's not going to help you long term, right? And that's one of the things that she says. I thought it was very funny. So when we're looking into moving forward from here, right? If we mentioned 4, okay? Number 5, you don't know what you want, so you end up procrastinating. This is a huge reason why people lack clarity in their business, right? You don't know what you want, so what do? You end up just procrastinating on a bunch of different stuff. So instead of not knowing what you want and ending up procrastinating, you need to gain clarity on what you want. Now, a lot of people will say, I don't know, right? That's okay. You can say, I don't know, right? However, if you did know, what would you tell me? And I've had enough conversations with different entrepreneurs over the years to know that when someone says, I don't know, really they're saying, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's an easy way out. So I want to give an analogy here that I really hope can sink in. I want you to imagine that right now you're on a boat and you're on a boat and it's circling an island, and it could be a big boat, a small boat, a dinghy boat, whatever kind of boat you like, right? And you're going round and round this island and you're looking for a diamond, like the diamond, the thing that's going to give you clarity. And at the moment you're going round and round and round. However, you aren't taking action. You're there with a telescope, you're looking in and nothing's really happening. You're waiting for the perfect moment. You're there until one crazy person decides to jump off the boat, swim to the island, and then they start looking at the island. They start moving things forward and doing things in a different way. Too many people, I think, are waiting for that perfect moment. You don't know what you want, so you end up procrastinating. Instead, if you can take action, if you can start doing the things that you need to do, and then you get feedback, it can enable you to move forward in a different way. I'm just curious, out of interest, for those listening and feel like that's you, where you're kind of going round and round on that boat, do you put a boat emoji in the chat if that's you and you feel like you need to start swimming? So we've covered 5 of the 6 so far, okay? I'll go through them one by one. So number 1 is you're dabbling with too many options and you don't know what to prioritize. We've mentioned you feel like you're drowning and you don't have time to step back. I mentioned being overwhelmed by the mountain of the task. Advice from too many sources and you don't know what to pick. And you don't know what you want, so you end up procrastinating. The last thing, and this will debilitate you more than others, is waiting for the perfect timing that will never occur. Okay, and William, appreciate you putting a boat in the chat there, right? Waiting for the perfect timing, which will never occur. And this kind of also goes back to the boat analogy, but I'd like to use an analogy of a lady that I work with. So her name was Anna, and she really struggled with being a perfectionist. And what was happening is she was in the fashion industry. And she would spend a lot of time trying to perfect all these different things. And then suddenly she would need to go to a trade show, and then it would be a crisis creator, is what I call this. And this is where you get yourself to a stage where you have limited time and now you've created your own crisis. You're like, oh my God, now I need to do loads of stuff, right? And then suddenly it's really, really overwhelming because we feel like the perfect timing will occur. But the truth is the perfect timing is never going to occur in our lives. And Layla, thank you for putting boat in the chat as well. So what we want to be able to do is to overcome this. We want to move away from being a crisis creator, waiting for this perfect moment, and instead to move through that perfectionism, to move forward in a different way. Because by doing that, what it does is it allows us to take the steps necessary. Now, a lot of people will get stuck in fear. It's the what if something goes wrong? What happens if I fail? What happens if? And very often we catastrophize the negative side of what we feel could happen if we make a mistake. And by doing that, we neglect the possibility of something amazing to happen. So what happens is a lot of people become stuck in their business, where they are struggling because of perfectionism. Out of interest, if you feel like perfectionism is stopping you, I want you to put a perfectionism in the chat, right? Like type in perfectionism, but I want you to spell it wrong, okay? Just to go against the perfectionist tendencies. So I know we're going to be going, I'm going to be coming live with you guys on Clubhouse now. So there's an opportunity for you to answer some questions as well. In the meantime, I wanted to kind of stop the lives elsewhere. Thank you for joining, and we will see you next time.